Good evening. Welcome to another episode of Let's Talk About Mental Health. I'm Nels Kloster. I'm an addiction psychiatrist working throughout Southern Vermont.
And my name is Robert Stack. I'm a licensed alcohol and drug counselor and a licensed mental health counselor. And this evening we have a guest, Ron Stahley, the Superintendent of Wyndham Southeast Supervisory Union.
Right. And as we always do, to remind you to reach out to us with questions or comments. And the Facebook address is at www.facebook.com/letstalkvt, or at our email account, which is letstalkaboutmentalhealth@gmail.com.
And I want to just say that, you know, I've known you for, you just said 13 years.
Yes, yeah.
Well, probably the best thing I did when I was on the school board was hire you. And I'm really pleased. And Nels and I talked about this month. We would talk about, or this year, we would talk about people in the community. Mm-hmm. And, you know, you were the first one to come to mind.
Oh, thank you.
And because, you know, when we talk about substance abuse and mental illness and the struggles and everything, one of the things that come up last year were questions about children, about adolescents. Mm-hmm. And, you know, I just think, I mean, you just came to mind. And I really, and what I'm hoping is that, you know, you could talk a little bit about what you are doing, you know, personally, maybe give some historical perspective, and perhaps as we have time, maybe answer some questions about some of the issues that we're concerned about.
Yeah, good. Well, so, you know, just to give you a little background about me, I was a teacher for 14 years, social studies and English, and I knew I wanted to get into some sort of administrative position, so I got my master's degree to become a principal. And when it was time to look for jobs, my wife and I, we had 4 young children. We decided to move to Vermont because we did some research about New England. We wanted to stay in New England and really felt like Vermont had a really progressive educational system. So I took a job up in Enosburg Falls, which is about 5 miles from Canada. And I said to my wife, do you really want to bring our young kids up to the Canadian border? And she said, yeah, it'd be good. And so we got up there and became principal and really loved it. Our families are from Massachusetts, and so we felt like with the young kids it was a little too far away to visit with them. So we moved to Southern Vermont, became principal at Leland and Gray Union High School. Did that for about 8 years, became assistant superintendent, and then 13 years ago, you were on the hiring committee, and it was a broad-based committee, and they selected me as the candidate, and I'm really thrilled that they did because I've had, you know, finished my 12th year last year, really enjoy it. It's a great district, great school district. Our 4 kids had gone through the district, and really I have that parent perspective in terms of our kids' experience. And so I knew when they were in high school I wanted to be in a high school away from them, so I wasn't directly involved with their educational issues, but I was close enough to understand what was going on. And when I became superintendent, 2 of them were still at the high school, and I let my wife do all the parent conferences and things like that. So we've really enjoyed our time in Brattleboro.
One of the things that I didn't do, and when I talked about you, I could have introduced you as Dr. Stahley, because you have a PhD in education.
Well, EDD in education.
Yeah. But what I wanted to ask you is about when you were in that training, how did they prepare you to take on this job? I mean, you know, it's not, no, because it's not just education anymore. There's so much more to it, and the services.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I actually got my doctorate late in my career. It was in 2008. And I was part of a group that we contracted with UMass Amherst, and the instructors actually came into this area to work with us. And we felt like all of us had either been principals or some administrative position, and felt like we should really focus our professional development on projects and work that we're doing in the field right now. So mine was on special ed with students with emotional behavior disabilities, and did a qualitative study looking at post-high school indicators for these students. So mine was kind of a interview process of students from 3 programs in Vermont, and it really gave me some insight. I mean, I had always worked with kids with some emotional behavioral issues, but to really spend some time with them and get their sense of what worked well in high school, what do they need after high school, what are they doing now after high school. So that didn't prepare me to be a superintendent, but it just gave me a good sense of you know, the students that we're working with. And I think that's the key. Any administrator that is a classroom teacher that gets into a principalship or a superintendency, you got to care about kids. Part of it's bureaucracy, and there are some managerial things that have to happen. But in my work, I have to be connected with kids. Otherwise, it's like, why am I doing this? So I've been fortunate to do that.
And one of the things that struck me, and I don't mean to dominate the conversation, but when we were doing the school boards and budgets and everything, and one thing that people would react to was special education funding and special ed. And yet, I've always thought that it was the best investment that we make sometimes. I mean, when you talk about helping kids, when you talk about kids who are, for whatever reason, struggling in school and they need help in school, it just seems like money well spent. It just seems like a good way of identifying and working with kids and giving them a chance.
Well, one of the things that we try to really work on is early intervention at the kindergarten, even pre-K really, but kindergarten through first, second grade, and really help get skills for those students so they are not necessarily eligible for special ed. Because we find that if you don't get kids early enough, then they do qualify for special ed. And special ed is great, but if kids can do it without being identified, it's even better. And I think one of the things that we've really pushed for, and there's a little pushback all the time from the federal government, is to lessen the requirements for just special ed eligibility, because what we like to do is have our special ed teachers work with our regular ed teachers, and so it's kind of a co-teaching model where they don't have to say, well, you're special ed so I can work with you, and you're not, so you can't be part of this small group. It doesn't make any sense. So we have these trained professionals to work with kids with disabilities that can really benefit the general ed population as well. So, we try to take it from that perspective.
Yeah. It just made me laugh. One time I was talking to my daughter Maeve, and I told her that she was special. She started crying.
I'm not identified.
No.
Yeah. But I think, tell me, when the expression an ounce of prevention equals a pound of cure really comes to mind. When we talk about mental health in general, the school is just an integral part of this, because the developmental phases that children are going through, and if they don't start to experience success early on, then that's just going to keep taking them way off the mainstream and deeper into difficulties. Yeah.
Well, maybe I'll give you an opportunity to talk a little bit about what you were talking about earlier. And I was really impressed with that thing where you said 57% of students, low income, we're taking advanced courses or college courses. Right. So, you want to say a little bit about that?
I gave you our action plan. It's a detailed document, and I don't think the viewers would really. Although you can go to our website and wssu.k12.vt, and you can find it. But it's a very dense document. But I think there's like 3 basic goals for us in this district. It's safe and healthy schools, making sure kids feel safe in their school environment. There's student achievement in terms of making sure that our kids are making progress on the Vermont standards. And there's a leadership goal. And the leadership deals with, school board leadership and principal leadership, but a real focus is student leadership. And so one of the things that we're really proud of with our student achievement goal is our dual credit program. We do have a number of classes that students can get both high school and college credit. And we started this probably 5 or 6 years ago with 5 classes. Every year, because the teachers are very excited about doing it, we now have 43 classes where students are able to get college credit within the high school and within the Career Center. Those teachers are certified by the college instructor. They change their curriculum to match the college curriculum. And we have over 300 kids this year taking college credit. Some will graduate with 15 to 30 credits, and as I said earlier, that 57% of these kids are either first generation or low income. We've made a commitment, and the school board has been great to fund a very small amount in their budget to be able to keep these 3 credit courses at $100 a course. So if you go to CCV, you're going to pay $650. UVM is going to be $1,800 for a 3 credit course. We're committed to $100 a 3 credit course. And if kids need scholarships, we have scholarship money available. So it's really we have really been considered a pilot for the state. There was a legislation passed last year, flexible pathways, where now the state in every high school gives students vouchers to take college level courses. And so I think they modeled it after our program, and so we're really proud of it. And you know, at some point you ought to have some students come on this show and talk about their experience, because it's
fun.
It would be a lot of fun to listen to what they've gained.
Well, I think the other thing it does is that, you know, for some, you know, I was the first one, my brothers and I were the first ones to get college degrees in my family, but it's this knowledge that it's doable.
Absolutely.
You know, just to take the course, look at the books, learn how to do it. I mean, I think that's really impressive part. Could I just follow up on something else,
Sure.
though? One of the things that used to concern us, and I remember Superintendent Ray McNulty talking about that. Now, that what's to do with kids that drop out? That you lose them as they go through. Now, you know, back when I was growing up, it was sort of like, well, they were going to the trades.
Yeah.
You know, they were going to their father's business or something. But one of the things we know now is that kids that don't finish school, they end up on another track, and they end up in other troubles and stuff.
Yep.
And is there any outreach program for that to identify?
Vermont Adult Learning is a great partner with us. So any student that is thinking about dropping out, the people at the high school will essentially coach that person, that student, to think about Vermont Learning, Adult Learning, because they can not only just get the GED, but also continue taking courses at, let's say, CCV, or some of our courses, and count for high school graduation credit. And we have a lot of students that will steer that way, so they're just not, you know, leaving school.
So if they stop showing up, they're not lost to the system? I mean, is there an outreach?
Well, it takes work. We actually have a liaison position where working with the, I would say, the most intense needs of students that we've identified with attendance issues that are likely to drop out, to work with those students and their families and connect them with some adult learning programming. Okay. So, you know, it might be clear in their junior year that they're not going to get enough credits to go to senior year, or you know, a senior that's really behind in credits, and they might say, you know, I might as well just give up. So we'll steer those kids to the adult learning program, and you know, we've had success that way.
Right.
Yeah. Now, as I was reading and preparing for talking with you tonight, I had noticed that one of the articles that talked about various levels of approaches to students around their mental health and their performance in schools. And it sounds like what you've talked about is sort of what we call indicated approaches, whereas a child's already in trouble, danger of dropping out, so program to help them. Another level then was sort of selective approaches. You mentioned sort of low-income children, and that's a risk factor for you know, mental health problems, for performance in school problems, and the college courses sounds like a great way to sort of address that group of students and help them do better. I'd like to hear something about universal approaches, something that's sort of about sort of the character environment of all the schools for all the students, which is another very important factor in their mental health. Well,
you know, we have a really strong pre-K partnership program. So all of the, I would say just about all of the private pre-kindergarten programs have a partnership with us. And so that's a state-funded program where actually the tuition money that the state will give the school district, we then give to the private providers. And the idea is to give parents a cut on the hourly rate for tuition, to get their teachers' salaries up a little higher, because those salaries are generally very low, and in some cases for their teachers to be part of the professional development opportunities that we offer in the school district. So we find that if we have a really strong pre-K program where kids are transitioning into kindergarten, that's really going to help us. And there's a lot of early intervention with pre-K through grades 2, let's say, because those are critical years coming into the school system, and things like, you know, learning how to read at the appropriate time. You know, kids can be off 6 months, a year, whatever, but there are real strong indicators that students that don't read by the time they're in 3rd grade, you know, a few years later in middle school, high school, are going to drop out. Because they just feel like they can't keep up with things. So those are some interventions that we do just universally throughout the system. And then, you know, I think I had mentioned earlier about the educational support teams, where students that have been identified as at risk or needing support, needing intensive interventions, the team will consist of the classroom teacher, a counselor, maybe the school nurse, maybe somebody from youth services, HCRS, in some cases DCF, in a very supportive way, trying to say to the family, what sort of resources do you need? What can we do to help you so your child is successful in the early grades? And that's a system that's throughout Vermont, the educational support team system. But it depends on where you are in terms of the resources that you can bring in to an area to help the families. And I think we're lucky in this area to have the resources that we do have.
Now, one of the things, and I've worked a lot in the substance abuse field, and so a lot of times when I interview people and they started using in their teens, or sometimes even earlier, but in their teens, high school, whatever, and since most of my work has been in dual disorders, sometimes what you run into is like, well, which came first? The home environment, the sexual abuse, physical abuse, trouble in school, getting high, doing drugs, smoking pot. And there's always that kind of mix in there, where they're having trouble in school, or they're having trouble at home, and one of their solutions is to end up using drugs, finding relief in using drugs. And I was just wondering, and I'm not leading the question, but you mentioned earlier that there's some trainings out there to identify trauma and identify people who have been victimized. And I wonder if you would speak to that.
Yeah, our administrative team this past summer had a person come in, and a trained psychologist that does a lot of work with trauma. And her work is called Trauma-Informed Schools. And it was really enlightening. We've done a lot with positive behavior intervention supports. We've certainly done a lot with behavioral interventionists that work in the school and are hired by the school, and that's really helpful. But the issues of trauma, to think about young students coming from a traumatized setting in the home into the school, and without some sort of knowledge and training, the teachers are going to look at that student and say, well, this kid can't behave, or it's ADHD, or it's just a kid that's out of control. When in fact, the student could be traumatized. And so a lot of the work is to train teachers to say, this is the sort of behavior that you can look at, and these are some of the things that we can help you, support you working with these children. Because, some of the kids are really coming into the system with some high intensive needs. And it's not bad behavior.
Right.
My wife teaches in a second grade class, so I get to visit that class once in a while. Don't let the audience know this, but on occasion I'll play kickball with the second graders.
That's the perk of the office.
That's the perk of my office. And I'll tell you, these kids are sweet kids. They're just great little kids, and yet sometimes they just cannot control themselves. And so you got to work with the teachers in terms of, so how are you gonna deal with these kids that deserve to learn, they want to learn, they may not want to learn all the time, but there's things in their lives that they're dealing with, and we got to help support them and the families. And so when we're in school, there were challenges, but not to the extent that there are now, I think. And so, people wonder, well, why do we have to spend so much money on education? Well, it's an important investment in the earlier intervention that we can make. We see really good results, because then on the other end, when we can keep the kids in school and they have an opportunity by the time they're high school to take these courses that are going to get them college credit. Not all kids have to go to college, but through the Career Center there are some really great certification programs, and kids that are taking these classes are saying to themselves, now I see myself doing these sorts of things after college, or after high school, in college, or in a training program. And it's just great to see that.
Yeah, and I've even seen some statistics around, say, learning how to mediate conflict, learning better, more social behaviors.
Yep.
That there can be, with that sort of universal approach, you can improve the standardized scores 11 to 17 percentile points. So again, it's not just fluff doing this. There's a real sort of educational, sound reason behind this.
Well, so Nels, that makes me think about our climate survey that we do with the young students, grades 2 through 8. Every year we have them do a climate survey, and again, it's related to our safe and healthy goals. Things like I feel like I'm part of my school. I feel safe at school. Is there at least one adult that I can talk to if I don't feel safe at school? students in my school are kind to each other. Now this is interesting because most of our indicators are really making good progress, and we look at these results and we ask teachers to work with their kids on these results. Now, 5th and 6th graders, 7th and 8th graders are a lot easier to think about working with this, but the one on kindness, that's just a universal thing.
Yes.
And it's interesting that of all the indicators, most of them are getting very strong. The one about kindness is 73% of the students feel like people are kind to each other in the school. So there's 30% of those kids that are feeling like people aren't kind. And so we're going to work on these sorts of things. And what I say to classes when I visit them, you are the ones that really help improve that indicator by helping your friends, working out issues on the playground, making sure kids feel included at recess, at the lunch table. And we have programs in place to work on these, what we call social competencies or social emotional learning, because we find that this is the most important thing that we can do for kids. There is the requirement for the academic work, for No Child Left Behind and the standardized tests. And I always tell teachers at the beginning of the year, I tell school boards, don't worry about those standardized test scores. Our kids are doing well. We're showing progress. On the national standards, Vermont is always in the top tier nationwide on our national testing. And so don't get hung up about, the failing school syndrome. Kids are making progress. We want to make sure they have a safe environment in the classroom so they feel like they can do a good job in school.
Well, one of the things that I really liked in that, and you mentioned it already, was, is there an adult you can talk to? And one of the things I always worry about, in hindsight, when you hear about the shootings in school or violence in school, there looks like, and now in hindsight you can always look and say, see, you should have saw that, you should have said. But one of the things is, it seems as if some people were aware of a problem, and there was almost a breakdown in communication. And sometimes it's the peers that know that someone's in trouble.
Yeah.
And somehow, I think in schools or I ran into this in the treatment centers, this idea that you don't rat the staff.
Yeah.
And yet, you almost have to break through that culture. You have to say, no, this is about making it safe.
Right.
And not only safe for you, but safe for the person involved. I mean, so I guess I was pleased to see that. It looked like 90% of the kids felt there was an adult that they could talk to.
And it doesn't have to be a teacher. It could be a custodian. It could be a bus driver. It could be the principal. Somebody in the school that they feel comfortable that if there's a real issue that they're not just holding it to themselves and they can talk with somebody. Because that kid in Newtown had gone to those school systems and he either dropped out or he was out of the school but he was part of that community, and somehow people kind of misread what was going on, and sometimes you don't catch it. But we talk a lot about being active bystanders, that kids need to be really come forward and not necessarily take it into their own hands against a bully or somebody mistreating them, but to talk to an adult. And you're right, kids feel like, well, ratting it out, or if I go to somebody, is it going to make it worse for me? I think if we can establish a climate that it's safe to stand up for yourself, it's safe to talk to a friend to say, you got to help me here, or to talk to an adult. And there's an article that we've shared lately that there are no bullies, and it talks about the poor behavior that kids get involved with. And we're not labeling kids a bully. It's like they're making mistakes, and there's reasons why they're reacting the way they do, and it might be a traumatized situation. But that kid needs help and support. But the kids that are the victims also need to feel like they can step up and say, okay, so enough is enough, and adults are there to help them. So
no, I mean, bullying is such a terrible problem internationally as well as around here. But that idea of being sort of separate, not having a group you belong to, not feeling a sense of power or belonging, it really seems to be a very important piece of that. And Robert, we probably can't count how many people we've worked with who have come up and talked about, my ADHD or my this and that. And when you ask them, it was missed the sort of the chaos in their families and the traumas of their personal experiences.
Yeah.
And it's interesting that school can be such a positive experience. And one of the things that's sort of worrisome is that for some kids it's really a negative experience. Right. I mean, You know, a friend of mine, I hope she's a friend of mine, Ann Emerson, started running a school for corrections. Yeah. And I was up there the other day, and somebody mentioned that school, and then how, and you just get a sense that they're trying to put that in there, that piece that was missing, or you know, and it's a very successful program. Yeah. I mean, if you read those interviews in the comments where they're talking about the graduates, they were, you know,
those were some of the students that I interviewed with my study, my doctoral study. And great kids, and they just needed some alternatives and something different, and they're doing really well.
And it's so interesting sometimes when you don't know them as individuals, you can make all kinds of statements about them. You know, you can make all kinds of generalizations. But then when you meet them and you talk to them and you get past some of the words and you get past some of the behavior, and you realize, oh, you know, this is a kid. You know, this is somebody you could help. This is a different thing.
If my teacher was around and talked to you about me as an 8th or a 9th grader, you'd be shocked.
Just for 1 second, you know, this is about mental health, and I don't want to be scary, but you know, we've had these things, suicides in schools and violence in the schools, and you must have seen a big change over the time. I mean, we only have a few more minutes, but what do you see us moving toward, or do you see something different?
Yeah, well, you know, I think, again, we're very fortunate to have really good partners in this community, in the school system and in the community. You know, right after the Newtown incident, we had a scare in Brattleboro that next month, and I'll tell you, the emergency responders in this town are so great, you know, from the police chief and the new police chief, Michael Fitzgerald, and I know you're going to have him on. Just great to work with. Peter Lynch and Mike Wukowski from the fire department, the interim town manager, Patrick Moreland. People in this community really feel like, you know, the schools are part of the community, and, you know, when we have some issues, they step up, they work with us. You know, when we have to have restrictive access in the schools, the town officials are really working with us to get information out to parents and to help make sure the kids are safe. When there are tragic incidents, where we lost a student last year, and, you know, think about preventative measures that we should be looking at. And, you know, again, our counselors, our educational support teams, we're really trying to identify students that really need that help, and, you know, create kind of a wraparound approach for students. And we hope that you know, it's effective.
And this is ongoing training that the teachers are getting, and
well, you know, the teachers, it's not as specific as that all the time, but clearly, you know, the idea of social skill development, that's something that they're aware of all the time, working with their students. The counselors and the mental health agencies that we work with, there's some great training that they provide. So, you know, we can always use more. There's a limited amount of time for professional development as it is, but it's something that we take really seriously.
Yeah. Right. And the family involvement too, I'd imagine, is quite important.
Absolutely.
I think about children who've done well.
Yeah.
Well, I want to really tell you, it's great having you on, but I'm going to ask you one question. You can say yes or no, or whatever, you know. My pet peeve is that I'm opposed to legalization of marijuana.
Oh, yeah, right.
And for you, just very quickly, what do you think of it?
Well, you know, I just feel like when kids are young, I know there's a lot of studies about brain development, and I think that's the last thing that kids need to be doing as a legalized approach, you know, and so maybe it will be at 18 or 21 or that sort of thing. But, you know, when they dropped the drinking age to 18 when I was a kid, you know, it made it easier for 14-year-olds and 15-year-olds to get it. Yeah. And so there will always be that access issue. You know, I think for medical purposes, you know, obviously there's research that shows that that's important. But to legalize it, I think it's just going to lower the standards and allow access to it.
This is my hour.
Thank you, Ron.